Hello there. Something you may or may not know about me is that I'm both a motion and graphic designer by trade. I've been doing it for almost 9 years at this point, and it's what I went to college for. Anyway, one of the things I spent a lot of time working on was logo design. I love logos. You may say that I'm a little obsessed actually. So today I thought, what better way to combine my two loves, logos and Xenoblade, than a video talking about all the logo designs and their variations in the series. Stick around because there's a lot more to talk about than you think. If you stay to the end, there's a cool surprise too. Before we get into the rest of the video, I'm gonna quickly do my please subscribe song and dance for you all. Please subscribe, I will love you forever. Alright, let's get to the logos. The first logo we need to talk about isn't technically a Xenoblade logo. This is the logo for Monado Beginning of the World, which was Xenoblade 1's original working title. The font used for it is pretty hard to determine, but it's possible that it's an edited version of a font within the Nouveau Serif family. This could be an entirely custom font though, since both the M and the A seem to be entirely different than what we see in the logo. There seems to be some texture on these letters that reminds me of the texture on the final Xenoblade logo. It's hard to tell if it's actually the same because of how low res the only image we have is. This next logo is a little weird. This is an image promoting the upcoming release of the official Xenoblade website in Japan. At this point, they had announced the name change. The reason for it was so people could identify that it was a Tetsuya Takahashi game and to pay homage to his previous works. I looked through the Wayback Machine, and it does seem possible that this image is official art, although I can't be 100% certain. What I can say is that the font used here is strikingly similar to Monado Beginning of the World. The reason I say that is because of these little dangly things at the end of the letter forms. You may be unaware, but these are called serifs. Perhaps the most common serif font, known by every child who was ever forced to write an essay in school, is Times New Roman. See those little strokes at the end of the T? Those are serifs. Any font that is lacking those is called a sans serif font, by the way. Just a couple of fun font facts for you. Anyway, like I said before, this font looks very similar. Just look at the A. There are only two other noteworthy things about this logo. One is how this text is italicized, which means that it's tilted. And two, the fact that the katakana Xenoblade is underneath the English lettering. As we move to the final version of the Japanese Xenoblade 1 logo, yes, each region has its own, we can see that both of these noteworthy concepts were retained, however several others have clearly changed. First of all, we have a completely different font now. This one is Helvetica. Yeah, the Xenoblade logo is literally just Helvetica. For those of you that aren't font freaks, Helvetica is one of the most popular fonts in the entire world due to its versatility and readability. In fact, it's the font plastered all over the New York City subway system. So, why was this used for Xenoblade? I don't know, but I think it looks good. This isn't just pure Helvetica though. There are some alterations. We have the classic spatters all over various letters, and finally one long brush stroke diagonally to form half of the X. But there's also a different kerning on the letters than normal. Fun font fact! Kerning is the distance between individual letters. It actually affects the readability quite a bit, and whenever you use a font, you should be aware of how the kerning looks, whether designing a logo or just writing a letter. I'll briefly mention the concept of leading, which is sort of like kerning, but instead of the distance in between letters, it's the distance between lines of text as a whole. So, very clearly, the letters in this logo have been tightened up compared to the default. This just makes the logo a bit more compact and flexible, as well as being visually pleasing. There's also a scuffed metallic texture on the letters. Overall, I think this visual design is pretty brilliant. Xenoblade's iconography typically shows us sprawling organic and warm fields, and this contrasts highly with the inorganic and cold logo. These certainly represent the dichotomy of the Bionis and Mechonis. I've also heard people mention that the ink spatters look to them like blood or oil, and that's an interesting thought. I could definitely picture a blunt object making those. It is a war after all. I've always felt that it's ink and calls to the kanji that's written on the Monado. What do you think? Now it's time to talk about the North American and European versions of the logos. Longtime North American fans will remember this logo and how it's on the box art, but not on the title screen for some reason. What is on the title screen is the European logo, since they were the ones that localized the game. This is the logo they use from now on internationally, and I can see why. It looks a lot better than this one in my opinion, even if I personally think the word Chronicles should be dropped entirely. I like that Helvetica is used again for the second word. Yeah, I have no clue what this is all about. What is this line? What is all of this? I guess Nintendo of America wanted to try something new. I also have no clue what this font could be. It's extremely generic looking. If we fast forward a few years to the release of Xenoblade 3D though, we can see that the logos are now consistent between Europe and North America, and it's gonna stay that way with every subsequent release. The only addition is that 3D is written in negative space on a rectangle in the same style as the letters. Hello, this is XenoBits from the future. I'm currently editing, and I realized that I actually did not mention that the 3DS logo is different in the European and North American regions. They actually moved Chronicles. The leading is different, and so is the placement. It's slightly centered now, and it'll continue to be that way through Definitive Edition and Future Connected, as we'll see. The Japanese logo for this game is identical, with the exception of them sometimes having the 3DS branding above it. If we fast forward a few more years, we have the release of Xenoblade Definitive Edition. The Definitive Edition text is the only major addition we have for this logo. It's red to symbolize the Monado and is surrounded by sparkles and feathers, which we can all safely assume are high Entia feathers. This font also seems to be within the Helvetica family as well, and is a bit on the heavier side, just like the logo. It's pretty fitting and clean if you ask me. The Japanese logo makes a major change though. Underneath Definitive Edition, it adds the katakana for the words Definitive Edition. The way you would read this is Xenoblade Definitive Edition. Sorry if my pronunciation is terrible, by the way. These feathers and sparkles are also in slightly different places. To cap off Xenoblade 1, we'll take a look at the Future Connected logo. The most obvious change is that the text is gold now. I don't really know why. I guess maybe to indicate that there's a bright future ahead. I don't know, man, it doesn't seem so bright to me. The words Future Connected are positioned more right than left, which I feel indicates moving forward through time. This font is also completely custom. Some of the letters have serifs and others don't. The letters also connect, much like the future they're referencing. It's very cool looking. The feathers are also retained from the Definitive Edition logo, but the positioning is different, and there's a really big one here. The more prominent feather likely symbolizes how the High Entia and Melia are integral parts to this story. The Japanese logo is pretty interesting though. There isn't any katakana that represents Xenoblade. Instead it says Tsunagaru Mirai, which means connected future. This katakana is right justified, unlike the English subtitle, which just seems to be tabbed over a bit. Fun font fact: when text is pushed against the left or right sides like this, it's called left or right justified. Similarly, when text is centered, it's called center justified. You might think we're done with Future Connected, but you would be wrong like me. Something I learned while working on this video was that the Future Connected logo actually has several variations, more than any other game in the series to my knowledge. On top of the English and Japanese ones we spoke about, there are versions in French, German, Spanish, Italian, and Korean, as well as both simplified and traditional Chinese. This is likely due to Definitive Edition having expanded language options compared to previous entries. Xenoblade 2 did get a patch in late 2020 that added Korean support though, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's it for Xenoblade 1 logos. I just want to quickly cover something else before moving on. There are several variations that I didn't talk about or won't go into too much detail on. They're mainly ones used on promotional material, the most common of which is the black variant, which most Xenoblade logos have, usually to be put over a lighter background. Also, pretty much all of the logos have versions with a light glow around. I'm just grabbing the highest quality files I can find for this video, so that's why some may or may not have these. I'm not going to go into detail on all of the alternates with the exception of the really interesting ones that I found. After spending a good chunk of this video on Xenoblade 1, we can move into Xenoblade 2. Ah, gotcha! You forgot about Xenoblade X. I know you did. Don't you lie. The first X logo was this X. When the game was first announced in 2013, this is all we had. At this point, we weren't positive that this was a Xenoblade game, but it sure as heck looked like it could be one. It used the same ink brush idea as Xenoblade 1's logo, but on the entire X this time. It's also very reminiscent of the Xenogears X, which makes a ton of sense. The development team definitely reworked a number of ideas from Xenogears into X, so to see them harken back to the logo is fair. A year later, we'd see an evolution of this logo. Helvetica has made a triumphant return, and the title is revealed to be Xenoblade Chronicles X. There isn't any effect on the letters like with 1's logo, and the word Chronicles has been moved to start underneath the O instead of the X. I imagine this is to open up the space a little, so the red X is cradled a bit and given more focus. Speaking of the X, it's actually different than the original X that we saw. I personally like this new one a bit more. The Japanese version of this logo includes the katakana Xenoblade Crossu. This game is actually called Xenoblade Cross in Japan if you didn't know. The word Xenoblade is also shifted to be slightly more inside the X to make everything more compact. That's it until we get to the final versions of the logo. Whoa, what happened? A drastic but necessary change in my opinion. There's this effect on the now grungy and metallic letters that makes it look like they're being shot at. To me, it feels like the bullets are breaking glass with a couple of blood spatters here and there. The entire feel of the game is encapsulated here. The word Chronicles has again been moved somewhere else, this time from underneath the O to underneath the N. The red X has been removed and been replaced with this stylized blue X. Even though I associate Xenoblade much more with red, I think the blue fits for this game. You can see screen lines on it, and in addition to referencing the level of technology present in the game, it reminds me of the big clock on Blade Tower. I've also heard people say that the gaps in the X remind them of tire tracks, possibly made by Skells. I don't entirely see it, but I like the idea that this is conveyed to some people. Like before, the Japanese logo shifted the word Xenoblade to be more inside of the X, and there isn't much else to go over here that we haven't before. Now we can talk about the Xenoblade 2 logo. The first time we saw a version of it was in 2017 during the first Nintendo Switch presentation. The most obvious thing to notice is that frickin' Chronicles has moved again. This time, it's underneath the X and E to make room for the 2. Again, there's no major effect on this one, just like with the second version of the X logo, but there is a slight linear gradient going from white to black. There's also a big red number 2. The red is going to stay in the other versions of the logo, and I imagine it's because they're sticking more to red theming in the series from now on. The Japanese version of this logo is pretty standard. The katakana does not include the number 2, and the only major difference is that there's a slight change in size and position to the word Xenoblade. The final version of the logo is pretty similar. They added the flames and burn marks to the letters to symbolize Pyrrhus fire. In the 2, there's also a small cross-shaped symbol. This shape is used pretty frequently in the game and in marketing. You might remember seeing it on Pyrrhus' chest though. It's also used on the Xenoblade 2 Pro controller. The Torna logo adds this golden banner underneath everything else. It's golden 'cause, golden country. The font here is the petite caps version of Mrs. Eve's. It's called that because where there would be lowercase letters, the capital letters are just smaller instead. Fun font fact. Something I've glossed over a bit in this video is the concept of font pairings. The act of pairing one font with another is extremely important because it can either make your design look much more cohesive or show that you really don't know what you're doing. There's no one way to pair fonts, but you usually want to have your pairs contrast with each other enough to be distinct and interesting, but not so much that they look weird together. The right side of the Torna banner is reminiscent of the diamond and polygonal menus throughout the game. The left side widens to show the Tornan crest. The Japanese version of this logo is pretty different. The Xenoblade katakana has been moved up to the top in front of the two. In its place is Kogo no Kune Ira, which means Golden Land Era. Again, I'm sorry if my pronunciation is terrible. I also want to really quickly mention that there's a Torna Chinese logo similar in design to the Japanese one, only the Japanese characters are swapped out for Chinese ones. Before I move on to Xenoblade 3, it's worth mentioning that for the Xenoblade 10th anniversary, Monolith released these two wonderful pieces of art by Choco. There's a unique series logo here. Xenoblade is golden with this purple glow around it, and there's just Helvetica with no heavy effects. Anyway, Xenoblade 3. This is the first time we've seemingly gotten the final version of the logo right off the bat. Unless you count Torna and Future Connected, but I don't. The position of Chronicles has moved again, this time back over to be underneath the X like it was originally. It was probably to make the 3 look a little bit better, like with all the other movements. The letters have this slight grain effect at the bottoms that I like quite a bit. The tops of them are fading away into these little particles. Now, I'll say that originally I thought this was a combination of the Xenoblade 1 and 2 logos. These particles would have been the ink splatters, and the fading parts the fire. I now see that it's likely this Off-Seer flute ritual thing that we've seen in the trailer. What exactly this does and how it's relevant to the game has yet to be seen, but I'm sure it's incredibly important since it's in the logo. The last thing to note is that the 3 has this complex pattern on it that we see tattooed onto the characters in the trailer. We're not really sure what this is, but it's definitely important to the plot. Now, this is normally where I would end the video, but I said I had a surprise for those of you that stuck around to the end. I wanted to show off my new logo. Yes, the XenoBits logo. My logo originally looked like this. You know, it's okay. A solid off-white with a couple of stars to represent the outer space. Pretty cute. I like the off-white I used a lot, as well as how it complements my pink. Biggest issue, this is not Helvetica. Instead, I used a similar font that I made some alterations to. It served me well, but I recently decided that I needed an upgrade. First of all, the new logo uses Helvetica. The glitch effect I've applied to the letters also matches my current aesthetic, which is vaporwave, retro, VHS thing. I'm just a lot happier with how this one looks. The old one is nice, but I think I was previously going for that minimalist thing everyone and their brother started doing, and I've since disliked it. It also takes me a lot longer to brand myself rather than literally anyone else for whatever reason. So, I finally landed on this, and I like it a lot. It will certainly be what I'm using for the foreseeable future. I have already rolled out this style over on my Twitch, and when everything is ready, I'll be changing my YouTube and Twitter stuff, which should have happened if this video is out. Alright, that is everything. All of the Xenoblade logos as of now. Very cool. I love them a lot. My personal favorite from a design standpoint is probably Xenoblade X's final logo, but the European Xenoblade 1 logo will always have a special place in my heart. Like I said, some of them I didn't cover in depth because they were mostly used one time on promotional material, but I sprinkled those ones around the video. I hope you're as excited as I am about logos and that you learned something you can use in the future. If you like the video, let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!